Welcome to Learn English with Podcast. Today, our amazing hosts, Luca and Maria, are here to take you through another exciting episode. Luca, Maria, over to you.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going deep on something I know is a big one for a lot of you, finding your passion. You know, that thing that really makes you tick. It's a question we all grapple with, and we've got some really interesting perspectives to dig into.
Yeah, it's a question that seems to come up all the time, no matter who you are, where you come from. What's cool about this deep dive, though, is we're going to look at this from two very different angles. Like, we've got one that's almost like a formula, like a scientific approach to finding your passion. And then we've got another that's all about real people and their experiences.
Yeah, it's a pretty wild contrast. On the one hand, there's this whole idea that you don't have to be born with passion, that you can actually create it. And a big part of that is understanding how dopamine works.
Yeah.
You know, that brain chemical that makes us feel motivated and happy.
Right. And the argument is all about how we get that dopamine. Like, way back when, we used to get it from doing stuff, like building things, making art, anything where you're actually creating something. But these days, we're surrounded by things that give us easy dopamine hits, like scrolling through our phones, watching tons of videos, that kind of thing.
And the idea is that all this constant consumption actually makes it tougher to find true passion. It's like we're overloading on the easy dopamine and kind of forgetting about the kind that comes from really putting in the effort and making something new.
It's a pretty interesting idea, right? I mean, think about how you feel when you actually build something with your own two hands, even if it's small. That sense of, I did that, that's linked to dopamine.
Yeah.
And it's a totally different kind of reward than you get from, like, ordering food online or just watching another episode of something.
Okay, so how do we actually put this into action? This approach boils down to two steps. First, you've got to cut way back on all the dopamine you're getting from consuming stuff. So less time on screens, less junk food, all that stuff we tend to overdo. This basically forces your brain to look for that dopamine somewhere else.
Exactly. And then step two is to try out a bunch of different creative activities. Could be anything, different hobbies, try stuff from a list. The thinking is that because you've cut down on the easy dopamine, you're going to be more motivated to stick with these creative things. And something's got to click, right? And if it doesn't, move on to the next one.
It sounds pretty simple, but let's be real. We've also got these insights from people who are living this struggle every day. We found this online space where people talk about finding a job they love, and there are so many different opinions flying around.
Yeah, and this is where we can really see if that dopamine theory holds up in the real world. I mean, people's lives are complicated, and so is the advice they give.
Totally. So the person who started this whole thread is a 28-year-old software engineer. They make good money, they work from home, but they feel totally stuck. They're looking for something they can really be passionate about.
Ugh, it's a feeling so many people can relate to, like going through the motions even though things look good on paper and just wanting something more, you know?
For sure. And the advice they get is all over the map, which is what makes this so interesting. Some people are just like, the whole system is messed up. They blame corporations and society for making people feel burned out and trapped, and they think the answer is stuff like shorter work weeks.
Yeah, it's a good point. It makes you think about how much control you actually have as a person versus, like, how much is the system pushing you in a certain direction.
Right. And then you've got people saying, look, just get a job that pays the bills and then go do the stuff you love outside of work. They say it's way less stressful to keep your passions separate and not worry about making money from them.
It's definitely a more practical approach, and for some people, it might be the best way to make it work. Like, you got to balance your passions with real life, right?
Oh, absolutely. And there's some great stories in there too, like this one about a musician who just loved playing until they started doing it for a living. It just became this burden and they completely lost the joy.
Yeah, it makes you think twice, right? Like, turning your passion into your job can backfire, and it's something to consider if that's the road you're thinking about.
It really is. Then there was this other piece of advice that I thought was really interesting. It was all about going back to the things you loved doing as a kid. The person mentioned they used to love sports and creative stuff, so people were like, hey, go back to that, see what happens.
It's all about rediscovering that pure joy and playfulness that we lose as we get older. I mean, sometimes going back to those things can lead to something totally unexpected.
Definitely. And of course, there's the practical stuff too, like taking breaks, having hobbies, using your free time to explore creative outlets.
It's a good reminder that finding your passion doesn't have to be this huge, dramatic thing. It can start with small steps, you know?
Absolutely. And what's fascinating about this whole conversation online is how much disagreement there is.
Yeah.
Like, some people are totally convinced that work doesn't have to be enjoyable, while others think it's like the key to a good life.
It really gets to the heart of the issue, doesn't it? There's no right answer. What works for one person might be totally different for someone else.
So much to think about, right? I bet you guys are feeling the same way. These two perspectives offer so many different angles to consider.
Yeah, for sure. And that's what makes this topic so fascinating. It makes you really examine what you value, what's important to you, and what you ultimately want out of life.
So I'm curious, what are your initial thoughts?
Yeah.
What stands out to you from this dopamine-driven approach, and what resonates from the experiences of those in the online community?
It's definitely a lot to unpack, and before we do, we want to remind you to like this episode and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives like this one. Share it with your friends who might be going through the same thing. We'll be back in part 2 to connect all the dots and see where this takes us. All right, welcome back, everyone. I feel like we just had such a great conversation about these two different approaches to finding your passion.
Yeah, we were talking about dopamine and how we're constantly bombarded with these like quick hits of dopamine from our phones, from TV, all that stuff. But it might actually be making it harder to find things that we're truly passionate about.
And then we looked at all those different people online talking about their own experiences, trying to find a career path that felt like meaningful.
It's really interesting how it all comes together. I mean, it's pretty clear there's no one right answer when it comes to this whole passion thing. It's such a personal journey for everyone.
Yeah, totally. But I think it's worth circling back to that dopamine idea for a second. I mean, it's probably not as simple as saying all consumption is bad and all creation is good. But I think there's something really important in that idea, you know? Like, it makes you think about where you're getting your sense of reward from.
Yeah, totally. It's like, are you spending most of your time chasing those quick dopamine hits from scrolling on your phone or watching Netflix? Or are you making time for things that maybe take a little more effort, but actually leave you feeling more satisfied, even if it's just like a little side project or something?
I think that's a key part of it. It's not about cutting out all consumption completely. It's more about finding a balance and being aware of how those easy dopamine hits might be stopping us from finding things that could bring us more like deep satisfaction.
And then you've got all those different voices from that online group, and they kind of complicate things even more, which is cool.
Mm-hmm.
It really shows that there are so many different ways to think about passion, and like maybe those traditional ideas about following your bliss aren't always practical or even something you want to do.
Yeah, exactly. We saw how some people were talking about how hard it can be to actually turn your passion into a job and how sometimes that can totally backfire. And then there were all those comments about like corporate greed and the pressure to always be working and hustling, which can definitely make it harder to feel inspired.
It makes you realize that it's not all on you.
Yeah.
Right? Like the systems we live in have a big impact on how we experience these things, like passion and purpose.
For sure. And remember those people who were like, just get a job you can handle and then do the stuff you love on your own time? I think that can totally work, especially if your job isn't really letting you be creative or express yourself.
It's about finding what works for you, you know? Whether that means trying to find a career you're actually passionate about or making time for your passions outside of work. It's all about balance.
So where do we go from here? What can our listeners take away from all this as they're trying to figure out their own path?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to be patient. Like, there's no rush. Finding your passion isn't some kind of race or competition. It's a process. It's like self-discovery.
It really is. And it's about trying new things and maybe going back to old hobbies, maybe even getting a little uncomfortable. You never know what might spark something.
Exactly. Don't be scared to experiment. And remember, it's totally fine to change your mind along the way. Like, what you're passionate about today might not be the same thing tomorrow. And that's okay. That's just a sign that you're growing.
I love that. Like, your passions can evolve. It's not about finding that one perfect thing and sticking with it forever. It's about being open to new things and letting yourself explore.
And let's be honest, you don't have to do this alone. Like, talking to people you admire, finding mentors, connecting with other people who are going through the same thing, that can be super helpful. Sharing your experiences and stuff can make a big difference.
It's like creating a little community around this whole idea of finding meaning, right? And speaking of community, we'd love to hear from you. What are you taking away from this conversation so far?
What's sticking with you? Let us know in the comments.
And hey, while you're there, if you're enjoying this deep dive, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Sharing it with your friends is always awesome too. Helps other people find us.
All right, so as we head into the last part of our deep dive, I want to zoom out a little bit. How does this whole idea of searching for your passion connect to like your bigger purpose in life? What makes life feel meaningful?
That's a great question, and it's something we're going to really dig into in part 3. We'll be back soon with more thoughts on that and a final question that will hopefully keep you thinking long after this deep dive is over.
Welcome back for the final part of our deep dive.
It's been a wild ride, right? We've covered a lot of ground. We talked about dopamine, we looked at what real people are saying about finding work they love, and now I think it's time to tackle the biggest question of all.
Yeah, the ultimate question, like, how does finding your passion connect to living a life that actually feels meaningful? It's something philosophers have been debating forever, but I think it's something we all think about personally, too.
Absolutely. There's this big idea out there that if you can just find that one true passion, then that's the key to a good life. Like once you find that thing that lights you up, everything else just falls into place.
It's that whole romantic idea that if you're doing what you love, work doesn't even feel like work.
Yeah.
Right? It becomes your calling. It gives you a sense of purpose.
But is it really that simple? Like, does everyone experience passion as this huge driving force that dictates their whole life?
And that's where things get interesting, right? Because like we've seen, not everyone feels passion in the same way. Some people, it's like this burning fire. It's all they can think about. But for others, it's more like a quiet little ember, a steady interest that brings them joy.
And for some people, it might not even be just one thing. It could be like a bunch of different interests and hobbies that all weave together to make a meaningful life.
I think that's so important. There's no right or wrong way to experience passion. What matters is finding what clicks for you, what feels right based on what you believe in.
Yeah, so maybe instead of stressing about finding the passion, we should focus on creating a life that's full of things that bring us joy, whether we call them passions or not.
I love that. It's about staying curious, trying new things, and letting yourself change over time.
And realizing that meaning and purpose can come from anywhere. Like maybe it's your relationships or the work you do in your community or even just the way you approach each day.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we wanted to leave you with one last thought.
Okay, so imagine for a second that you had all the money and time in the world and you could do whatever you wanted. What would you do? What would your days look like?
What would bring you joy? What would make you excited to wake up in the morning? Do you think those things might hold a clue to your passions, even if they don't fit into the traditional idea of a job or a career?
It's something to think about, right? And we'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Share your ideas in the comments.
We've covered a lot of ground today, and I hope this conversation has helped you think about passion and finding meaning in life in a new way.
And remember, there's no right answer. It's all about finding what works for you and enjoying the journey.
And before we go, don't forget to share this episode with your friends. Leave us a comment and hit that subscribe button for more deep dives like this one.
Thanks for joining us. Until next time.
Okay, so we were talking about finding your passion, right? And we've established it's not some magical lightning bolt moment. But let's dig deeper into those sparks we mentioned. Think about those times when you've lost track of time. Maybe it's when you read deeply engrossed in a video game, solving a puzzle, or even just having a really good conversation with a friend. What is it about those moments that grabs you? Is it the challenge, the creativity, the connection? Start paying attention to those little moments of engagement. They like breadcrumbs leading you down your own unique path. And let's be honest, sometimes finding your passion feels like trying to find a needle in a haystack. You bombarded with messages about what you should be doing, what's successful, what's cool. But here's the secret. Forget all that noise. Your passion isn't about impressing anyone else. It's about what makes you feel alive. It's about what you can't wait to do, even if no one else cares. We often get stuck in this mindset of, I have to be good at it right away. But that's just not how it works. Think about learning a new language. You're going to stumble over words, make mistakes, and feel like a total beginner. But if you keep at it, you'll start to see progress. And that progress, that feeling of getting better at something you care about, that's where the passion really starts to bloom. Let's also address the elephant in the room. Fear. Fear of failure. Fear of judgment. Fear of the unknown. It's totally normal to feel these things, but don't let them hold you hostage. Think of fear as a signal. It's telling you that you're stepping outside your comfort zone, and that's a good thing. It means you're regrowing. So, how do you overcome fear? Start small. Take baby steps. Try something new for just 15 minutes a day. Or find a supportive friend to try it with you. Remember, courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing something despite it. And speaking of friends, let's talk about the importance of your environment. Who are you spending your time with? Are they people who inspire you, challenge you, and support your dreams? Or are they people who drain your energy and make you feel small? Surround yourself with people who lift you up. Find your tribe. Those people who get you, who share your interests, who make you feel like you belong. They'll be your cheerleaders, your sounding boards, your partners in crime on this journey of self-discovery. Another key aspect is to cultivate curiosity. Stay curious about the world around you. Ask questions. Explore different perspectives. Read books. Watch documentaries. Listen to podcasts. Talk to people from different backgrounds. The more you learn, the more you'll discover what sparks your interest. And don't be afraid to follow those sparks, even if they lead you down unexpected paths. Let's address the concept of purpose too. It's often intertwined with passion. Many people find their passion by connecting it to a larger purpose, by using their skills and talents to make a difference in the world. But purpose doesn't have to be some grand, world-changing endeavor. It can be as simple as helping a friend in need, volunteering at a local charity, or simply being a kind and compassionate person. Find ways to contribute to something bigger than yourself, and you'll find a deeper sense of meaning and fulfillment. And remember, your passion doesn't have to be your job. It can be a hobby, a side project, a volunteer activity. It can be anything that brings you joy and a sense of purpose. Don't put pressure on yourself to turn your passion into a career. Just focus on enjoying the process and finding ways to incorporate it into your life. Finally, be patient with yourself. Finding your passion is a marathon, not a sprint. It's a journey of self-discovery that takes time, effort, and a willingness to experiment. So, be kind to yourself, celebrate your successes, learn from your mistakes, and never give up on your dreams. The most important thing is to keep exploring, keep growing, and keep living a life that feels authentic to you.
Thank you for watching. Your journey to better English and unstoppable confidence starts here. Like, share, and subscribe. Let's keep growing together. See you in the next video, champion.